Intellectually engaging to think outside the lines with conversation about the nation that never leaves you blind. Take a listen and pay attention. Here is where you find the educational, sensational meeting of the minds. Yeah, it's the meeting of the minds. Meeting of the minds.
Welcome, you are watching Meeting of the Minds. I am Selah V, and today we are discussing cultural appropriation. I would like to introduce you to our guests. First, today we have Camille Smith. Glad to have you back. You are a recurring guest. And also with us, recurring guest, Damon Stith, martial arts expert, Sefa Decote, and also Austin Warrior Arts. So if you're interested in martial arts, please look that up. We also have the director of the show back on the air with us, Charles. Glad to have you back with us this time in front of camera, right? Yeah. And we also have a good friend of mine, Delencia. She's just such a great personality and has so much thought and input. I was like, you need to come on the show with us today. So she was like, I'm in there.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you for being on the show with us. So this topic has came up frequently, cultural appropriation. We've seen it with Bruno Mars and a couple of other things that we'll discuss. But I led a panel for a global Women of the Global Majority Summit. And I was the moderator for that panel. And while we were on that panel, I can't remember how we got on the topic, but eventually, I turned to the crowd and I was like, wait a minute. So, we were discussing what is okay as, what is cultural appropriation, what is not. And so I got to this point where I was like, so wait a minute. I asked the entire crowd, I was like, so if I want to wear a kimono, I go to a thrift shop, there's this awesome kimono, and I want to wear it. That's not okay? And everyone was like, no. And I was like, really? And I was like, moccasins? If I want to wear moccasins as a fashion statement, is that okay? And everyone was like, no. And I just kept kind of being like, I couldn't understand, because I was like, there's a difference between cultural appreciation and a cultural appropriation. So I still have a little bit difficulty. Camille is a huge advocate for this stuff. She is a cultural appropriation radar. And so she will let us know, the thought process behind it. I'm not sure if I'll agree, but to know her perspective is really, really important to me. So we're going to kind of delve into that. Let's start with, I'm going to quickly say, I want yes or no's to start off with. Bruno Mars, cultural appropriation, yes or no? Camille.
Can't speak on it.
Okay. All right. We're going to get inquiry on that in just a minute. Yes or no?
No.
No, cultural appropriation. Bruno Mars,
not.
cultural appropriation?
It's actually both.
Both?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Appreciation and appropriation.
Okay.
I would say more along the lines of Delencia, and just that he's just kind of whack.
And he's kind of whack. I'm not going to say that he's whack. I'm not a big Bruno Mars fan. I know that he's talented. I agree that he's talented, but it's just, he's not really, sorry, Bruno. But anyways, so why did you say that you can't speak on it?
Because I'm not impacted by that conversation or by that occurrence. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to collect my people and my participation on those kinds of things. So I'm not here to tell anybody of color how they need to feel about any topic pertaining to them and their experience. So I don't even know what Bruno Mars identifies as. Mm-hmm. I've heard the conversations around him, but I don't feel like that I can appropriately speak on that.
Mm-hmm. I want one of you to kind of say why you think it's both, and then Charles, I want you to come in with your counter on that one.
You want to go first?
Well,
you want to speak? Go ahead.
No, I may be too harsh in saying that. I think it's too harsh for me to say that it is cultural appropriation. I do feel, I guess, cultural appropriation in the sense of black music being taken over by someone who is, ethnically ambiguous or whatever. So that's not why I think it's cultural appropriation. And it may be completely silly why I'm saying it's cultural appropriation, but I do feel that the time frame the music time frame in which he's like referencing and using is kind of, to me, it feels it doesn't feel legitimate and authentic. So it has nothing to do with him it doesn't have anything to do with his ethnicity and the question of black music. It's more the question of him representing a certain time period, a certain style of music, is why I said for appropriation. So I probably shouldn't really answer this question. That's
Interesting. Lindsay, why do you say both?
I say appreciation and appropriation because, one, Bruno Mars states that he appreciates black culture and he grew up in it, and this is something that has been a part of his life for a long time. Can't say fully how in-depth his understanding is of the history of black music and what all it's gone through and things like that, but he's definitely grown up, as a lot of us have, and a lot of individuals who are not black have grown up listening to the music and feel it in themselves. So he appreciates the music. The appropriation, I think, does not occur on him. I think it occurs on the music industry. The music industry is the one who is appropriating the culture, and they're allowing for him, through his racial ambiguity, to be the one who reaps the benefits of black music in ways that black musicians have not been able to do so.
Charles, any thoughts on this yet, or are you just taking it?
It's two things. I don't think you can appropriate anything that you sell, which we sell our culture all the time. Like, we get over on selling culture. So if somebody buys something, if it's something that you produce that people can buy, or a service that somebody can buy, you can't appropriate that. Like, you sold it to the world. So now it's become something larger than any one race or ethnic group or whatever. Like, because as much as it's black music, it's also hip hop culture. And there is no race for hip hop culture. I grew up in it because that was the predominant music of my time. And that's what I identify as. And there was kids who lived in the apartment complex that I lived in that grew up in the same culture, listening to the same music. We did the same things. We're all different colors. So there's that front. And plus, like, that's appropriation is how we learn from each other. Am I not supposed to do something because somebody or some other race or some other culture did
Okay,
it
so let me ask you
before?
this.
Like,
Let's
that's silly to
say
me.
for example, there is this lady, her name is Maria, and she's been making these tacos or burritos a certain way for 10 years now. Like, she's been making them that way for a long time. And then so Susie and Kelly go and try Maria's tacos, and these are amazing. Like, these are, oh my gosh, these are fantastic.
Right.
And now, I think we're gonna use this. And then they go and they make $1 million off of Maria's recipe.
Right.
What is that? What do you think that is?
That's theft.
Okay.
That's intellectual property theft. But, like, the whole argument about cultural, like how Damon was saying that, he thought Bruno was whack. Like, I'm not a particularly big Bruno Mars fan. I recognize the talent. He's an entertainer more than he is a singer of anything, talent-wise. But, like, he's unoriginal. And there's plenty of people that are unoriginal.
Right. So
And plus, there's the whole racial ambiguity. He's Filipino and Puerto Rican. Like,
So then if he is Puerto Rican, wouldn't it be safe to say that he has black in him?
You
No.
can, well,
No?
Yeah, he's Caribbean.
No. He actually, if you look it up, they state that his genealogy is not of black origins. He's like Jewish and something else, Filipino, and it's one other thing. But none of it is of African American of African descent.
I thought, go ahead.
I think usually people, they go, like, they call a book by what it looks like. So, like, I think looking at him, he could pass as
Afro features.
yeah.
Black, Hispanic.
Yeah. He could definitely do that, and that's probably, allowed him to connect in that way because of how, when you look a certain way and it takes forever for you to explain. Well, no, I'm Filipino. My mom's side is Jewish and German, and instead of going through that, it's easier for you to kind of fit into the category that everyone else gives you. So I can understand that.
Is black only African descent?
No,
Mm.
I don't think so. There are people in the world that were categorized as black and have no genetic connection to the continent of Africa. Many Southern Indians, even the Native Americans, were referred to as negritos in Spanish.
Aborigines,
Aborigines.
same thing.
Yeah. So there's I think there's a concept of black as it relates to like the white power structure, and that exists. We're not all necessarily coming from the same area, but that idea of you're a darkie, you're a black, you're a negro, you're a negrito, whatever the case may be.
So I'm going to give you guys a stance. You guys say cultural appropriation or not. Kind of maybe even two. But like for me, cultural appropriation is, for example, these braids are box braids, or they're known as cornrows, let's say. These two different hairstyles. And I call them the milkshake braids. Like I just made up thing. Or I named them after myself.
Braids.
Yeah. Let's say I name them after myself braids. To me, that's cultural appropriation. Now, if I'm like if I bought a kimono and I'm like, so let's say there was a child's birthday party, right? There was a dispute on this one. There was a child's birthday party, and they did a Japanese-style birthday party where all the girls wore, kimonos, and they had the big shoes and, chopsticks in the hair, and we were saying, some of us were saying, no, this is not cultural appropriation, this is cultural appreciation, because they're not renaming it, they're having fun with the culture and enjoying that. You disagreed with that, right?
I did disagree with that.
Really? Yeah, so show that perspective.
I feel like there's so much to unpack, and I feel like people really try to complicate this issue when I feel like it's pretty straightforward. I think that if it's not yours, you don't need to have it. And I feel like if it's not informed, then you can leave it alone. I mean, I don't understand how a room full of 8 white mothers in Utah think that they are going to impart some kind of deep knowledge or understanding about old cultural traditions that are going to leave a lasting impact on their 5-year-old white children. Why that needs to be done, the value in that, I think that that's where the line between appropriation and appreciation comes in. It's like you can observe this culture, you can respect and understand what's happening, or you can just take things and make them yours without understanding the deeper ramifications. So, I mean, I think that there's a way to do it, and I think that was done wrong.
Okay.
So
I want let Delenzia jump in and then Damon right after.
I think for me an issue with that is we are looking at individuals who grow up to become racist and unappreciative of the culture of other people, and it starts in places like that. When you say it's okay to dress as someone else, to take that on, and you're not giving them a background to it. You're not helping them to understand the meaning behind the clothing, the shoes. The people participate in these things for a reason. And when it's easy for me to just dress up, then that's nothing more than Halloween. That's a costume. So there is not a foundation of appreciation there at all. And they will grow up saying, "Oh well, I can just put this on and I can dress as this, and it's nothing, and take it off whenever I want to, and it's okay. And yeah, I might appreciate how cute it looks on me, or how it makes me feel, but that doesn't mean you actually appreciate the people and the culture. And that's why we have such racial and ethnic issues, because people are taking bits and pieces of individuals' culture, and they're owning it, but they're not understanding the full culture of those people that come, the whole package. And they're taking that little bit, they're owning it, and they're saying, well, I'm good with this little piece of you, so you should be good, I should be good, and all should be good. And then they're unpacking it as well when they want to, and when it's convenient for them, without any understanding that this is who we are, and we carry this with us, and this is what makes us the individuals that we are, our people, who they are, and things like that. And we can't just unpack it and go be something else and somewhere else. I have a problem with that, because, like I said, when you teach your children it's okay to dress up as it, then they grow up and they become something else, and it ends up being a problem.
I have thoughts on that. I'll wait until after Damon.
Yeah, I was thinking a few things as you guys were talking, and I'm not sure if what I have to say is valid. Like after listening, I do agree that when I think the idea of ideas, of culture, of language, all these things are from history, from time since we can remember, have not been rigid boundaries. There's been a certain amount of fluidity, and that fluidity has not always come from peacefully sharing ideas. It's come from domination and from appropriation. So when I'm thinking about going back to like kimonos, like there's a certain aspect, and I don't even want to say if it's there's a certain aspect, say, of Japanese culture that's now ingrained in American culture. This starts as early as the 1800s when Theodore Roosevelt is learning, jujitsu, judo from a Japanese practitioner, into the 50s with the introduction of Sanjuro and Yojimbo, these movies that went to influence other American filmmakers to make movies like A Fistful of Dollars and The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. Yeah, exactly. So it's like from an early time, samurai culture has been introduced into mainstream America for consumption. Not always from the people that created the stuff, but sometimes in the case of Yojimbo and Sanjuro, this has been the case. So then, it is, so when dealing with another culture and wanting to be, and I'm speaking from my own experience, because as a martial artist, if I were to only stay in my lane with my training, then like I wouldn't be doing what I was doing, So I started off learning, Asian martial arts. I started off learning karate, and not in a very mindful way of like, okay, I'm embodying the entire ethos of Japanese culture in my practice. I was going to a karate class at the time. And I've had the benefit of living in Okinawa and experiencing the culture like firsthand. And I don't think that makes me any more authentic to anyone else, but I do think that there is a level of respect that you have to go into when you are engaging in other cultures, but at the same time, I think that some is like what you were saying is that some of it has been prepackaged and it's kind of like ingrained, so it's nothing to see like people wearing ninja suits and stuff or samurai gear. We don't even think about it because it's been part of mainstream American culture for a long time. And I think that when it comes to cultural appropriation and the idea of it, it is what you were describing earlier, which is very easy to identify and really easy to address. It's simple, just like what you described. It's like, bam, it's like, how is this actually benefiting you? Are you taking this culture, these ideas, and making them into a caricature that you can put on and wear for a moment and then take off? Kind of where it gets kind of murky for me is when you do have an appreciation for the culture. You may not have a complete 100% understanding of that culture, but you do sincerely approach it. And so since we were talking about Japan and talking about kimonos and culture going like in that direction, it made me think about like this movement in Japan where like these guys are really, 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 really embracing hip hop. Like they are embracing hip hop. Like they found a way to put dreadlocks in 5 minutes where it takes like 6 months to a year for you to lock your hair to make it into dress. I mean, they're really into hip hop. Really into hip hop. I know hip hop is a global culture, but at the same time, it does have a beginning spot. It has a starting point somewhere. And they're in their best trying to like embody and respect that starting point. And I think that that there are those situations where it's very clear cut, but then there's other situations where it becomes a little murky, and it may depend on where you stand on that in that perspective, whether you may say that that's hip hop head and say, oh man, no, only true hip hop comes from New York, or only true hip hop comes from the hood, or only true hip hop comes from alpha male dominated perspective. It could be argued that way.
I think one of the big things about this is the term cultural appropriation, which basically means taking things from other cultures.
Yeah.
Right? I don't necessarily think that is bad.
Right.
Where it becomes a bad thing is where you're mocking people, where you're mocking a culture. Like, there's a distinct difference between somebody having a Cowboys and Indians themed birthday party, right? Because that is quintessential American culture. Now it may be wrong, it's inaccurate, the way it's portrayed, but in this country, it means a certain thing, right? And you see a 5-year-old, a bunch of 5-year-olds running around dressed like Cowboys and Indians. I don't necessarily get as mad at that as I do when I see college students having a Pimps and Hoes party, because those kids aren't mocking Cowboys and Indians. They're not mocking Native Americans. They don't really know. They don't have the context for it. Now, I have a problem with their parents, like you say, not giving them the explanation about it. But those college kids are mocking black people. That's a completely different thing.
But those kids grew up, those kids that were playing Cowboys and Indians grow up to be those sorority and fraternity kids that have Pimp and Home parties.
You can't blanket say that, though.
Okay, but I think that it's true that I also say that you cannot blanket say that, well, this is okay, but this is not okay, because it's like to say, well, that's quintessential American culture, but I think that what we're all kind of missing here is like we're not thinking about this in context of like America's history and like where we are at right now. Like right now we exist within a white supremacist culture, and like we are not.
That is America's history. Like it's
right,
always
but
been
so
that.
but you can take an act, like you can actively say, I no longer want to perpetuate that. I want to be the person that says no, thank you to that. So I think the issue is like is instead of saying, well, that's quintessential Americana or American history, is really taking the time to be like, okay, that's not okay, and here's why. So instead of like perpetuating those behaviors and allowing for some but not the other, and I think that like music, hip hop culture is a great place to talk about that, because I think that there's so much happening there as far as like who we exploit, who we exploit and fetishize, while also simultaneously oppressing, right? So it's like, I want this and I want that from you, and then I can get rid of it at the end of the day. What I mean? It's like, it's there's so much to unpack, and it seems so simple and yet so complex at the same time.
Well,
because
can I ask a question?
No.
Yeah.
Was Black Panther cultural appropriation?
No,
Why not?
because it was a movie about Africa. And
No,
so
but it was about a fictional place in Africa that took from multiple cultures
So you're
to
really
create
gonna
this
use
one
the word
fictional
fiction
thing.
to
Wakanda's
make it.
fictional.
It doesn't matter. It's supposed to be of Africa,
So
and
let-
so it embodied Africa.
So let's
That was
press
his
pause.
point.
I'm going to recap what everyone's saying real quick so we can find a new starting point. One thing that you're saying is that like it's kind of like cops and robbers, right? Nobody's offended if you're playing cops and robbers.
Right.
Nobody gets offended like that. The problem becomes is when the Indian becomes like
The bad guy.
The bad guy, right?
Right.
So, but if it's not in that vein, you're saying then like, let's say I'm like, I want to be the Indian. It's not like the bad guy, but usually it turns into that. So great, excellent point that you're saying that it turns into that type of thing. So I agree with you on a lot of areas. I see what you're saying about how that can be turned into like the bad guy, like the Indian is the bad guy and the cowboy is the good guy. So great points over here. I really like where you're going. Like Wakanda was created by taking all these cultures. Is that cultural appropriation? And now you're adding into the mix that this is a work of fiction, and so it's not somebody saying that, like for example, so this is yeah, this is the part that I want to find out if it's wrong. Like, so you're saying it's a work of fiction, it's different. So
No, I think his point was that because it was a work of fiction, it became an appropriator of African culture.
Of multiple African cultures.
Okay, and I'm saying it was a Wakanda is not real, so it's not like he could pinpoint a particular place in the country and a particular people and say this is these individuals.
Right.
So what they did was they studied all of Africa, they studied the different aspects of the culture, and they brought it together. It was more of a collage.
well, I want us
of-
to
of
make
the
Wakanda
culture.
a real place now. So that's where we're going to take a right turn. And let's say Wakanda is actually a real place that somebody's doing that. Because I need to understand, like, these questions that I'm asking is actually for understanding. I watch Korean soap operas. I love it, right? I love K-dramas. And let's say on watching that, there's things that I see that I really like. Like, for example, there was a bad lady, the nemesis in the thing, and she had this long curvy thing that she wore on her pinky finger, and it was pointy, and I was like, oh, I want one of those. Later on, I saw Erykah Badu rocking one, and I was like, oh, she got that thing, you know. But I saw it there, and it was from seeing it there that I was like, oh my God, I love that. That's so stylish. I want one of those. Or even like after watching numerous K-dramas, I really started to like, I drink a lot of tea. Like in our culture, Persian culture, we drink a lot of tea. But I like the cups that they were drinking out of. Like the way that they were drinking out of their cups. I just like it. And you watch and you're like, doggone it, I want some of these cups, and I'm going to drink my green tea out of these cups. Matter of fact, there's a couple girlfriends out there that they'll come over and I'll go and I'll bring the whole green tea and we'll sit down and we're going to drink green tea out of my cups because I don't know why. I just like that. And so what I want to know is that, like, let's say, for example, I'm watching an Indian Bollywood thing and they have these, certain earrings that I'm just like, oh, I love those earrings. Those are so cute. I want that. So let's say Wakanda. I like the earrings from over here. I like the neck plate from over there. I like that. And let's make it a real place or a real person saying, oh, I love that fashion statement. I want to wear that. And go.
So, I would say, I think that when we look at culture, and I believe this is because of our history, and I'm saying as Americans, our history in dealing with other peoples and other nations. So we're coming from that perspective of like an apologetic standpoint. Some of us are when we're looking at culture. We have to keep in mind like things like, for example, that we're describing as part of culture. Say, for example, these things would have been for sale. So many of the traditional Swahili houses, they have China porcelain bowls that are like they use to decorate their houses. Okay, we can argue and say that Chinese porcelain, China is Chinese culture. It's sacred. It should only be in the possession of the Chinese. And it goes back to his original statement about, well, if they are trading and selling these bowls, having this kind of stuff in your house can't be appropriation under those conditions.
Wow.
So then, and I think that, like I said, when we're looking back at culture, like now we're saying like, okay, what is culture? How are we defining it? Another example, trade between different nations. So in West Africa, it was very common for cloth material prints and stuff to come in from Europe, and they traded those patterns, those materials in Africa, and then other goods from West Africa went up into North Africa and into the Mediterranean. So like if we look at it solely as like clothing, as like material or as like patterns, and we can say that it's hard to say that it's appropriation under those circumstances if there are things that were being sold as goods. I see you smiling. I want to hear why.
I just want to say, I think what I am hearing from the two gentlemen right here is that as long as it is commercially available or it is a part of the what is the word?
Commerce,
America is a
capitalistic
structure, then it is okay. Culture and commerce are supposed to be separate. They should be recognized as separate. Just because it's commercially available, or it's been introduced into the capitalistic system, that doesn't mean that someone aside from that culture I don't think fully have the right to just take it, make it.
Can
But
I?
how?
your-
If
Okay,
somebody
wait.
sold
I want to
it?
speak on that real
let,
quick.
let Camille jump in. You rebuttal, and then we'll end it with
Because
Charles.
I could speak to that, but I want to address that too, because I think that there is such a thing as cultural capital, which is like what I see happening is that cultural capital has become commodified, right? So like I think what you're talking about is kind of taking it out of the context of what's happening today, like in our American society. Like we have moved so far beyond this like exchanging goods and services, right? Like there's such an imbalance in our system that there's no level playing field. There's no like, well, I want to take this and I'll give you this in exchange, right? It's like I'm going to take that and I'm going to push you down as I take all of your shit. Can I cuss?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's kind of, that's kind of the difference. I think what you're saying is really valid, but I feel like contextually right now, American society, we've moved far beyond that.
Right. So then in Japan, if I'm wearing my hakama and my kimono, and they're wearing dreadlocks and baggy pants and kalkanai and fubu, like, what are we doing here? So like,
Right.
Are they appropriating my culture? Am I appropriating your culture? Are we sharing cultures? Like, which one is that?
I think
I'm gonna let you, Charles. Did you want to jump in real quick, and then we'll go to Valencia, or did we already speak on it?
No, it's just that coming at it from as an American, which I am, like, I personally don't even like the term African American, and not because I disagree with it or anything like that. I describe myself as black because I see myself as somebody who is here that doesn't have any cultural roots to Africa. Like, all of my family that I know of is from here. We don't know anything about our family beyond that point. This is my culture, is being here, being a black American, coming from slaves, who I know my great great grandfather was a slave on both sides of my family. Like, my culture is here, and it's multicultural. I was born in LA and raised in Texas. Mexican food, Mexican culture is part of where I grew up in because they lived next door. They lived in my neighborhood. They went to my schools. I've known some Spanish my entire life. Like, I grew up watching Kung Fu movies. Like, I enjoy other people's culture because I grew up in multicultural places.
Exchange.
appreciation.
That's like,
Yeah, but that's
you're-
what I'm saying though, is that if I can go down the street and have somebody from Korea teach me Taekwondo, right? I'm not appropriating their culture. They are
Yeah, but you're paying
giving
them
me
to
a-
teach you.
right. But that's what I'm saying though, is that
But
if
you're
I
not-
can buy that,
Okay, but
if
you're
I can
not
buy
going
that,
to
then that's not
learn
appropriation.
Taekwondo from them and then go open up a shop right by them and then put them out of business. And that's what appropriation usually does. It ends up undermining the original people who started, whether it's an art or a food or whatever it is that they originated. It usually is where they end up not making any money off of it anymore. They lose their way of living, and then they end
Right,
up having
because
to
larger-
find
which I
something
get you
else.
guys'
And
point,
that's where the
is that
appropriation will come
the
from. They're no
larger-
longer getting the credit.
The larger problem with this isn't exchange of ideas or appropriating from other cultures.
It's the thievery.
It's society deciding that, oh, I'm more comfortable learning from this person or taking this thing from this other culture from somebody who looks not like the person that it came from. Like,
Okay, so like,
Maybe
this
not
is
with
this
that.
is what I want to say. Like, is it okay for a white woman to wear dreadlocks or cornrows?
What's the reason?
Well, I'm gonna give two. She just she wants to just look good. Okay. Two, she's a boxer and she wants to keep her little wispies out of her face. So
Fighters typically
so she
braid their
braid-
hair
yeah,
back
yeah,
when
yeah.
they're
So she
in
braids
the
her hair.
bout.
So then it's
most female
okay.
athletes braid their hair
So
back.
wait a second. So what if she says, "I really like your hairstyle, and I want to do my hair like you"?
So that kind of goes back to where I was about, like, just because it's commercially available, we just feel like we can do whatever we want. And that goes back to, you know, the mothers letting their children dress up in the kimonos. You know, you're taking on this caricature of me, and you have no understanding of what that's about. Demons, I'm sure your locks have a purpose to them. There, and I know people who, you know, that it's a spiritual thing. There's a process to it and all that. You don't just it's disrespectful for you to just throw that
Hold on
on
a
in a
second, Bucky.
sense
Let her finish
without fully
completely.
understanding all of that that's going with it. And so what I think a lot of people don't understand is there is a lot of emotion and love and, you know, other things that are not tangible that are connected to these properties, and people just pick them up and they're just taking them and doing whatever they want to, and they're not understanding those other elements.
And it's strange that, like, when, let's say, for example, if it's funny because this is the part that really bothers me, though, is like sometimes you want the culture, but you don't want the things that come along with the culture. Or, like, for example, maybe I'm an Asian and I'm taking on dreadlocks or something like that, but yet we don't want black people around here. Or let's say, for example, you know, you couldn't get a job with dreadlocks, but now somebody is, you know, doing that. So that's a little bit, you know, bothersome. I don't think too much. I don't have a problem with someone saying, "I really like your hairstyle. I want to do that hairstyle." That, to me, that's not
To you,
what
personally?
for me personally.
Right.
But what is an issue to me is either renaming it like the other person, they didn't have a whole culture around it, or that it's kind of like, it's not fair that, like, let's say people couldn't get a job with that hairstyle, but now that you're doing it, those are the areas I do have an issue with it. But as if you want to jump in and then Camille afterwards.
I think that it's a tightrope with, like, the hairstyles. Like, so it can be argued whether or not dreadlocks are solely the property of African people. The Rastas adopted the dreadlocks when they saw the Mau Mau fighters in Kenya, and because they were out in the woods and wilds, they had locks, and that symbol, that image of a free, resisting Africa against European tyranny, they adopted that look as their look. And so now you can't think of dreads or locks without thinking about Rastafarians. But they appropriated that idea from those images, and they didn't really know much about Mau Mau culture and about Kenya, but they connected with that image and they created this, and this is now their symbol.
Wow.
The dreadlocks are many of the sages in India wear dreadlocks. They wear locked hair.
John the Baptist or Samson.
Right. So it's like, it can be argued whether or not it's like solely the property of, and even though now, right, and that's like the past, but like now it is closely associated with black people. So then it brings up that question. What gets me is, like, what bothers me more so is not like seeing white people with dreadlocks or with braids. What kind of bothers me is, like, when it comes around Halloween time and you got, like, the Afro wigs and the dreadlock wigs, and it's like, then you come dressed up as a Rastafarian or as like a person with an afro. So it's like, then it becomes like the hairstyle becomes more of an issue with me in those situations than it
Okay,
is
so
if
then
someone else.
I need to dig deeper on that one. Let me dig on that one. So let's say I want to be Cher.
Camille needed to
I want to. Oh yeah, that's right.
That's okay.
I'm gonna throw this in.
She took a
Thank you.
side. Let her
I
get it
gotta
out.
know this one. I want to be Cher, so I go get a long straight Cher wig, and I'm like, if I could turn back time, y'all wasn't ready. But what I'm trying to say is like, let's say I go and get that wig because I want to look like that, or let's say I say I'm gonna be Britney Spears and I go get a blonde wig and I'm looking like that. But then let's say I really want to go and pay tribute to Catherine Cleaver, and I go and get an Afro wig. So, huh? Oh, well, she's an amazing activist, but I'll hit you to her later. But she's amazing, right? But let's say I'm like, man, I want to be Catherine Cleaver, right? So is it okay when I go get the blonde wig? Is it okay when I go get the straight long wig? But there's a problem when I go and get the afro wig.
Okay. So I just want to speak as a white person trying to, if I may, trying to
navigate,
do work around dismantling white supremacy. Right. So like I think for me the reason why I say it's so simple is like, if I'm going to do a thing, then I need to be ready to come upon somebody in my community or in my life who has a problem with what I'm doing, and I need to be able to defend it. So I think for me, like, you can take from Britney Spears and you can have a blonde wig, and you can take from Cher, and the reason we can do that is because there is no backstory there. What I have learned about like black hair and black women in particular and their hair is like, that is such a sacred thing that I would never want to overstep my bounds as somebody who's like pro-black, here for black liberation, here to like do work around race, you know, like I would never want to overstep the boundary of what is appropriate and what is like, I don't want to be disrespectful. If my goal is to pay homage to somebody, then like, how dare I put on a costume with so much subtext, right? Like so much weight behind it. And I think kind of what you were saying earlier, like, oh, Kendall Jenner or any of the Kardashians or whoever, they can put on these braids. And the Kardashians invented these braids. Meanwhile, like, black women have been rocking that hairdo since forever.
And it not being
and can't
appropriate
go to school
in
with
school.
it.
Right,
Still
right.
getting
Get a
fired
job
from
with
jobs,
it.
still being told to go home from the
Being
classroom
called names
academic
for it.
setting.
So,
Yes.
so is the problem the appropriation or the reaction to it?
It goes back to what I said about the capitalistic system backing it up and making it beneficial for individuals who are not of
So,
that culture.
but see, that's the thing though, is that's the reaction to it.
No, it's
That
not
is
just
that
a
is-
reaction. It's
well,
not
no,
just a reaction.
It's
The Kardashians.
I'm a black woman and I
the
can't wear this
Kardashians
hairstyle at
are-
work. I can't get a job because they say it looks unprofessional. But then some white woman wears the same thing and she goes in and she can get the job. The unfairness is in the reaction to it. See, like for me, I don't like telling adults what to do with their body.
The unfairness is not in the
Let's-
reaction.
it's
The
in-
unfairness
I
is
guess
in the
it's in
racial
our
I want
system.
Charles to really
It's
be
in
able
the
to
racial
finish
system.
his,
The racial, and that goes
Hold on
back
a
to.
second.
I just
What
want to
he's
say
saying.
that goes back to the original
Let's let
statement
him
in regards
finish
to
his sentence
Bruno
out
Mars
completely.
is the appropriator. It's the
Mindz.
music industry that's the appropriator.
I
That's the
really
racial system in
want him
place.
to complete all the way
Let's
with
see.
no interruptions. Sorry.
See,
go ahead.
this is the all right. So I'll use the Bruno Mars example. Bruno Mars is doing New Jack Swing. He's doing a bad impersonation of New Jack Swing, basically, 90s R&B, right? And there's a lot of black musicians not doing R&B because it's not profitable, because the industry doesn't want to see. Well, I shouldn't even say it's not even the industry. The industry doesn't care. The industry is going to put out whoever sells. If there's a black person who's selling tickets like Bruno Mars, the industry is going to back that person because the industry is behind Beyonce. The industry is behind Jay-Z, behind those people. Now they may be
Hold on, I'll give y'all a
exceptions,
second to rebuttal. No problem. It's
They're
really hard
exceptions.
because
I need
he
to
says,
take notes.
yeah, he says
I
really
need to have my
hard.
piece of paper.
and this is the
have-
and this is the crux of the unfairness
See if I have another
of
pen.
blackness, in my opinion, of blackness in America, is that we have to fight to be mediocre. Like, we're not fighting to be excellent. The excellent black people, they get a shot, not as good a shot as everybody else. But if you're at the top of your field, because you're so good, people will be there. But like, if you're average and you're black, you don't have a shot.
That's
You
kind of like
can't-
the
I'm going to give
Eminem.
Camila opportunity and then Jamal.
This will build off of what he's saying. So it's like, intensifying that because Bruno Mars is a safe option.
Right.
We start talking about like Elvis and talking about Eminem.
Oh my gosh,
Right.
Vanilla Ice.
Let's talk
He
about
stole
Post
from Big
Malone.
Mama
Are
Thornton.
y'all familiar with Post Malone?
Yeah, Post Malone is
Yes.
garbage.
But why is Post Malone garbage?
Because he makes shitty music.
Well, he sells out.
Oh, I know.
He is selling out.
I know, and he's a mediocre artist that is getting way more buzz because people are comfortable hearing what he says coming from him as opposed to it coming from somebody else. If he was a black artist, he wouldn't make any fucking money.
But you just said that if a black artist was selling out, then the
Well, no. I'm saying if he was making the music, I'm talking about the quality of the music. if a black artist is selling those tickets, because Bow Wow was a trash artist too, but he sold out arenas. B2K, trash.
But that was
They
also
sold-
when they got more radio play and things like that.
Yeah,
And
but that's my point. It's like that's not about the industry. What we're talking about largely is society. Society
Yeah.
accept these things.
No.
And people
But
commercialize
see, the
those
thing
accepted things.
is, it's a system that puts the music
the
on
table,
the. I'm sorry.
Lindsay, sorry. It's okay.
Just have it.
It's okay,
It's
okay.
it is.
A system.
It is a system that determines what music gets played. There are I don't know how many non-white radio stations that exist, and then there are more Hispanic radio stations
Right.
than there are black stations. I think since moving here, I think I've only found three black stations.
Well, it's really only
Two
one.
No, there's
of them.
only one.
88.7.
Yeah,
That's the
KZI,
only. That's the
shout
only
out.
black station. The
I
other
mean,
ones
as far
are
as just playing music.
Clear Channel.
As far as playing music
I mean,
for the black
predominantly black
playing
artists.
artists,
Yeah,
yes.
got
Right.
you.
There's two stations, or excuse me, three of them. And that's it. And then the types of music that we have are so vastly different and are so expansive that it shouldn't be held to just three stations, which is not what non-black radio, listeners get. You cannot blame the artists for the fact that they are not selling out when they're not even getting airplay.
I'm not
But
blaming.
It's
But see,
no. But you just said that
We're-
they need to
we're
be
having-
selling out to be able to get to
We're
you know
making the
Well,
same
you
to
see,
get to
point
a
in
certain
two different
you guys are saying-
conversations.
You guys are saying the same thing.
I'm not blaming the artist. I'm not
'Cause
blaming
that's how
the
it sounds to
industry.
me.
I'm not blaming the artist, and I'm not blaming the industry. I'm blaming society as a
No,
whole.
And what
but
we're
we
consuming.
can't.
Yes.
But we can't hear that if we're not getting it. We can't hear it.
All
I
right,
can't
I'm
support
gonna
it
let
if I'm
Damon
not
jump
hearing
in
it.
to tie y'all's two together.
Yeah, so like I think when I think of that, I think of like Eminem. Eminem is I'm gonna say this on record. He is as a lyricist, he's a superb lyricist. He's really good as he's a really good MC. Not taking anything away from his skills as far as like crafting.
He's not the king of rap,
Oh
No,
no,
he's
not by
not.
far.
but he's gotten that.
But
title.
but yes, the fact that
So, yeah, go
the
ahead.
fact yeah, we're gonna start talking about Rakim. Like I didn't even want to hear about that. But the fact that he is the first white man, like, because there was a time I remember that you can listen to an artist and you can tell the white rappers
I can.
because there was something that they didn't quite have as far as like the tone and the sound and cadence or whatever else. For me, Eminem was one of the first ones to be able to bridge that gap and stand it. He's a superb lyricist. And I think what you were saying is like if you take a black artist on the same level, on the same par as Eminem, and there are plenty of them out there, because right now Eminem is seen as like the king of rap. He's
Wow.
like the rap guy.
One of.
Uh-huh.
Right.
He's
One.
one of.
One of.
I
He's
don't even
great.
like the sound of his
But-
voice. It's so
but-
annoying.
He's
But-
really not that great.
Sorry,
but
Mom. Go ahead.
I'm sure that there are like Pharoah Monch. There's like a slew of other like black
Oh, there's a ton of black.
artists.
There's nobody better than Black Thought.
Right. So and
So-
that are on the same level, if not better than him. But like they don't get the same kind of respect and notoriety as him because he's like his him being white
Yeah.
is like he's like
a rarity.
he's a rarity. So he's
Well,
like
and there's the fact that look, we live in a country where there's a lot of white men, and they look at him on that stage and they like I can
Yeah.
identify with him in a way that I
And see,
can't
that goes back to
identify
the-
with the Pharoah Monch,
Yeah, and
with
that
a
goes
Black
back-
Thought, with a Chuck D, with a whoever.
but that goes back to like
So that's
like
audience.
the
That's,
origins of like rock music.
Right.
It's like it was devil music and not acceptable music when it was black music, but when you find guys that can repackage it and put it in a way
acceptable
that's
package.
yeah.
Right.
So it's like it's our society's fault, and then I mean the industry's going to do what it's going to do, but the
Yeah.
industry feeds that.
Yeah,
And so I need
now
to
that I 100% agree with. The industry does feed into it,
okay.
but when it comes right down to it, when you talk about industry and commerce, the bottom line is money. The bottom line always comes back down to money. It always comes back down to that. And every once in a while you'll get somebody who will go back and pay homage. Like the only thing, because I really don't like the Rolling Stones. I've never really liked the Rolling Stones. But one of the coolest things they did was when they came to America to tour for the first time, they wouldn't play a place that wouldn't allow Muddy Waters to open for them.
Yeah.
Because that was their musical influence. They went back and paid homage to the music that they got over in England. So that I respect about them, and I wish more artists did that. Eminem tries to do that as much as he can because he's helped a whole bunch of black artists from Detroit get out because he knows he's standing on their shoulders.
Yeah.
But the only time I blame the artist for that stuff, and the reason why I don't have a problem with Bruno Mars, is because he does always talk about, no, I got this from Teddy Riley. I got this from whoever. He at least acknowledges where he got it from. My problem with Elvis was always that he never acknowledged Big Mama Thornton or any of the other people that he stole those songs from. It never came out. It never came out. And people can say that, well, we didn't know. No, people knew about it because there was actually more black radio stations back then than there are now. So
I just want to ask real quick, it sounds like you do have a problem with appropriation then. Because if Elvis taking the music from Big Mama Thornton bothers you, then it means cultural appropriation is something you have a problem with. You just recognize the commercial aspect of the whole situation.
Yeah, I have a problem with theft and mocking.
Okay. I just wanted to
that
just
I
make
have a
sure.
problem with. And that's always been my point, is if I'm not stealing, if I'm not mocking you.
But it doesn't have to be an outright and easy to acknowledge theft. And I think that's where a lot of people are lost as well. You know, all of those artists that tried to make it and were hindered from being able to get to the next level because they were predominantly African American, dark skinned, or, were not racially abused, any of those things like that. Think about all of the people that worked under them that were stopped from being able to get to the next level. It has a trickle down effect. When you talk about women who are not able to get jobs because of their hair, but other individuals can, using the same hairstyle. Well, those women who weren't able to get those jobs, they're financially set back. It has an effect. There is, it doesn't just, the buck doesn't just, or the effect doesn't just hurt that one person who you're seeing out there in the forefront. The cultural appropriation does have a cyclical effect to other individuals.
Do you think that there's an answer for blending the lines, that there is no hair that is just appropriated to one, like anyone can get it, is like what I'm trying to say? Like, do you think that that might be basically like if a black woman wanted to wear a blonde wig or extensions, then that's her business, and then if a white woman wanted to go and get like afro wig or extensions, that no one would say anything, like, is that a good thing, like, to head in that direction?
You want to go, or
Well,
you want me?
I have a couple of things I would like to
Go
say.
for it.
So I think that first, I think that we have to unpack this idea of, like, does art imitate life, or does life imitate art? Who controls the narrative, right? So I think when we talk about cultural appropriation right now, like, what we're really talking about today is where's the power imbalance, and, like, what's perpetuating that power imbalance. So, like, for example, you have all of these black artists who really, I would say 80% of their audience is, like, white suburban youth. For a lot of that, like, black musicians that are on mainstream radio, a lot of their audience is white urban youth.
True.
I work in a high school. I work with predominantly Latinx population, and they are emulating the behavior and the language that they hear in the music that's on the radio.
That's right.
And they are throwing around words that I'm uncomfortable hearing, that they have no cultural attachment to, but that have a lot of weight for other folks, for other cultures, for other races. And I think what's happening is that there's this disconnect, right? So, like, that's why I talk about, like, black people and men specifically as, like, being commodified, like athletes, musicians. Make us money, and then when you no longer can make us money, we'll push you to the side. But we're still, like, exploiting, appropriating cultures, using them for whiteness, like, using them to our benefit, and then, like, trash, out with the trash this week, what's next? It's like art, black music, black creation and creativity, it's all commodified, I feel like, and that's what we're exploiting and we're selling, and the people that are doing the creating are not being
So I want to elaborate on what she's saying as an example, just to give it. So, like, what I hear you saying right now is that, let's say I am a millionaire fashion designer, and I come to the hood, and I'm, like, looking around, I'm like, holes in jeans. And then I go and I start making my fashion with holes in jeans. so I came basically to this culture and I saw how they were doing things and I went and I made money off of it. Yes?
Sure, that's a pared down version of I would say.
Okay. You tell me why that's not a problem. Like maybe I'm genius that I could see that them doing that was a hot thing. Is that like a good idea? Is that like, wow, I'm so smart that I can find out what the next hot thing?
Commercially? Yeah.
Okay.
Commercially, yes, it is a brilliant idea because hip hop culture leads
Camille.
culture in the world.
So much.
If you want to make money, that is the way you make money. Like you like they say, good artists borrow, great artists steal.
So let's
Like that's.
if
But if you're asking me if it's right,
uh-huh.
like
And I think that's the
it's
point.
ambiguous. It's ambiguous at points.
So like it's kind of like, okay, if the person themselves went to try to sell the holy jeans, it might not work out so great. But Abercrombie and Fitch does it.
Right, because it gets commodified. It's just like there's so much in our culture that the second you hear a 40-year-old white woman say it at a store, or like she's making a joke, oh, we're gonna raise the roof. Like the second somebody like that says it, it's over. It's over. So now we got to need a new thing.
Oh.
So like so much of our culture, that's like a huge problem that I have with it, is that
What culture?
once you let
What do you mean?
any culture, once you let something out, once it's outside of the bounds of your whatever your group is, and it goes out there, especially if it's artistic or commercial or technological or anything like that, it's out in the world now. Like, and they're gonna be like when the Chinese invented gunpowder, the second the Europeans saw that, it was like, oh yeah, we taking that shit.
I see that point.
Yeah,
But I think that simplifies. I think that kind of mindset of like, well, that's a thing and this is happening, so okay.
well.
I think that we have to make a decision to at some point say no. I think that's what it comes down to, is like, that's why we have these conversations about cultural appropriation, is like, are we going to continue to let this occur and continue to perpetuate this unbalanced system, or are we going to start creating stronger boundaries around?
And I know you want to see it this way, but my problem with that is, as a black person, is we can't keep having these conversations about other people stealing from us, and then in every fucking beauty supply store, we're actually appropriating other women's hair. Like, we can't talk about how
But it's
other
not
people steal.
appropriation if white is the standard of beauty.
Yeah.
Like, that's not appropriation.
But
That's just that's there's nothing like
who's responsible for that though?
I think that's what
white
we're doing right now.
If white is the
We are responsible for that.
So if I watch like a movie and I see like a really cool jewelry that is from
You're
another
really fixated
culture,
on-
because
like,
I
I gotta
want
get
to,
me
I
one of those.
love this stuff. Like,
Okay, can I
like-
make a point about that really
Yes.
quick? Because this was something I was thinking coming in. Like, I love supporting artists and artisan and makers of color. Like, I'm all about like pay people money for what they do and what they make, right? And their efforts. So if I go to Indian powwows like a lot, like Native American powwows. And I remember going to one like several years ago, and I had bought some leather boots, like leather moccasin boots with the
Right.
fringe, and I was like,
Yeah.
looking good, yo, at this
Thank you.
powwow
Yeah,
with
yeah,
these
yeah.
fringe boots on.
right.
And this man came up to me and he was like, "Oh, I like your boots. Did you make them?" And I was like, just in that moment, like it all hit me. Like, that dude made his boots. He made his clothes. He made like his jewelry. This is his whole entire life and culture that is dying, that is dwindling. And I'm here with like my Minnetonka boots that I paid $100 for, strutting my stuff, totally disconnected from all of that, right? All of that power and that weight. And I like went home and sold them on eBay. I was like done. And from then on, I can go to a black market or like an African market, and I can appreciate a woman, what she's creating and selling, and I can buy from her. I don't have to buy a dashiki and rock it and be like,
Yeah,
I
that'd be
support
questionable.
black art.
Yeah,
I
that would be
can buy like some lotion that she made and support her art. I can go to a powwow and I can buy jewelry that was made by indigenous folks and support them in the arts, but I don't need to like wear a headdress. Do you know what I mean? Like there's just, and that's where the line of appreciation and appropriation comes in.
I have to think about that. As, for example, my martial arts teacher over here, Mr. said, like, it's crazy. We're like inverted. Like, I'm immersed in Black culture, and he is heavily immersed in Middle Eastern culture. Like, there's things he blows my mind about on etiquette and things of Middle Eastern nature that he knows that I'm like, oh my God, you know? He doesn't come, but he's from Austin, Texas. He doesn't come from a place that wears, you know, turbans or things like that. But he has his reasons of why, you know, he connects so much with the North African culture. Also, it's related to literally sword fighting and things like that. And so, like, I found my place in this, like, you know, inverted place where, you know, he's appreciating my culture, I'm appreciating his culture. So what do? Go say, like, you can't, you know, wear that, or you can't. Go ahead.
I'm gonna jump on that because because I've experienced when I first started researching African martial arts, I went to the university and actually, you know, sat and spoke with students from the continent, asking them questions about their indigenous martial arts, their indigenous combat sports, whatever. And you would think that I would have been like, oh, you know, this person is, you know, asking me questions about a practice that Americans don't really know about. And actually the response was totally different. I was criticized for that. One, there were no martial arts in Africa. Two, you're trying to Asianize African culture or Africanize Asian culture. And there was just a large amount of just like backlash, resistance to that. This was like 20 something years ago now. I say that because, you know, I do, even as a Black man and, you know, with traceable ancestry to Africa, whatever, you know, I get a certain pass with some of the stuff that I do because, like, you know, he's connecting with his roots, and I can't really, you know, say anything about that. On the other side of it, there's always going to be someone that is either going to care strongly, be indifferent, or they're going to be on the other side of the fence of that. And I think that as people that are appreciating a culture and trying to be respectful, like if you get something, if you purchase something and you don't, if you purchase it, you get it just for the sake of wearing it, you can do that. And there may be people in the culture that it doesn't bother them. They're glad that to actually see that people are carrying this on. And other people may say, well, this is like, you know, something very serious and sacred to us. And as the person that's wearing it and coming from the outside, you have to understand that I suggest you should do your research, handle with care, and be prepared to hear oppositions from all those sides. And I think it's just the nature of the beast.
It's good to say.
I think that's what makes it simple, right? Is I think it does come down to that final like decision of who do I want to be, who do I want to present as, what do I want to participate in. I think for me as a white person, like this is just something I constantly am visiting. Like I grew up loving rap and hip hop, and I came to a point where I realized that if I truly loved something, I needed to stop emulating it and just start appreciating it, right, and supporting it without trying to make it my own, because I didn't have a claim on it like that, you know.
Well, I'm not sure what that means.
Okay.
Because to me, hip hop is poetry to music, right? So what you...
I mean, like maybe like in a literal sense, I think, but I think what I mean is like, if something is really important to somebody, it can still be important to me in different ways without me like trying to... Without mocking it, but beyond even mocking it, it's like...
becoming a caricature of a participant.
And I think too, we have to always consider like how we're feeding into that bigger narrative, the bigger context of a situation, right? So like, I don't want to just like consume things and then discard the skeleton of something. Like if I love and value something, you know, I want to uplift people that are doing that, and I don't, you know, it's complicated and it's simple. It's like for
Kinda
me,
like the Miley Cyrus of it all kind of thing. You know, every you know, she would make you think she appreciated Black culture, but it was only during a certain phase of her life that she actually, and that's not to say she didn't grow up listening to it. That's not to say that she didn't actually really like it, you know, in regards to being able to listen to it in her car and with her friends and sing the songs. But it was only beneficial for her, you know, she got a gain out of it. And when that gain was not, and when it was no longer of a gain, then she threw it away. And you don't see Miley Cyrus being Black no more. And that's happened for
because
a lot
she's
of
not
people.
Black.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like Post
but-
Malone. He can
We
take
got a
out
few
his
minutes left,
cornrows.
so-
He can take out his grill and be like a white dude, and he doesn't have to carry any of the additional burden of being a Black person in America, other than appropriating music or whatever and selling out shows. And then next week he'll be like, "Oh, now I'm an alternative singer," you know, and everything, it's discarded.
And I do need to, and that's valid. I just need to shout out
closing
okay,
statements.
Okay,
Go ahead,
okay,
go
okay.
ahead.
But there are those situations where there are people that grew up in the neighborhoods, and like, you know, like in New York, for example, culturally, they grew up in that same environment. So you may hear them say stuff that you hear Black kids talk,
That's
and
right.
Black kids in their neighborhood, they don't think anything of it because.
I don't think that makes it
because they
okay.
know him.
Because that was me. I grew up in this neighborhood. I went to Keeling. All my friends were Black, and there came a point where someone said to me, "Why are you trying to look like us?" And I was like, "Oh, like."
I got that all my life about why I'm trying to talk like a white person because I speak a certain
But that's
way.
also white supremacist. We live in a white supremacist society, so that's the standard. And that brings up another point of like African American vernacular English, right? Like when I was younger, I talked differently because I talked how my friends talked. And it was like in adulthood when I realized like I don't get to do this. I don't get to turn that on and turn it off because it's not for me. And because people are still oppressed because of their hair and the way that they talk, and they're still devalued in society because of their dialect. So I think we have to really, really examine under a microscope like the greater implications of our behavior in that sense.
I don't know. I agree with like Damon, you know, like growing up in the areas that I've grown up in, being in the places that I have been, and even being like, if I go to New York, even for a month, I come back speaking a whole nother way, right?
Yeah.
And so there's so many different things. Turning on or off, like for me, I believe all of those things are a part of me. Like if I need to get gutter in my language, I can do that. If speaking to somebody is going to help me convey to them something and connect with them more, then I'm going to use that because that's in me. It's not that I'm like being fake. That is what is in me. It's been poured into me. But then like speaking to someone else, that vernacular is not going to be effective. They're not going to understand. I need to use words like vernacular.
And so that's
So-
code switching. Like for Black people, that's like actually a matter of like.
But I
life and
disagree
death,
with that.
life
But
and
see,
death
I actually
and-
disagree with that because even for a Black person, I've had this conversation with so many of my friends, is that I think that that's okay for even like, let's say a Black woman. For a Black woman to speak in one way out of a business setting or whatever to convey what she's trying to say, to connect with them because that is in her. Literally, I can get, you know, one way and speak one way if it's effective for the person to receive. And like, for example, if I'm walking down the street and I run into a homeless man, you know, I might look at him like, how you doing, brother? You doing okay? Right? I might speak with him in a certain way. And he's like, yes, ma'am, I'm doing well. And then like with someone else, I might use another. But it's all of it is in me. It's nothing that is not in me. I went to a university, Houston Tillotson University. I have college dialect in my mouth. And then over here, I participate in this. So all of those elements are in me.
It's a lot more deep. It's not even, I think.
Yeah.
It is a lot deeper than that. Code switching basically is turning on and off who you are.
Yeah, I
Not
agree.
just the
to
way you
assimilate
talk.
into whiteness.
It's
is the
turning
underlying
on and
issue.
off who
Yeah.
you are so that you can end up being a totally different person in their eyes. It's so that you can fit within a box, stay within parameters. And it is in such a way that if they were to see you be who you really are outside of that, then
couldn't
they would be
handle it.
confused
Got it.
and
Got
have
it.
an issue with that.
And you would
It's
be
not
devalued.
about being okay, being with your girls and then being with your boy.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not that simple.
So-
Or talking to a
It's that
stranger.
they couldn't
It's
handle
much
who
deeper.
you really are.
They
and
would
write it
not.
down, Simone? Gotcha.
They would not be able to handle who
It's,
you are.
it's like, so I have a friend, I'm not going to blow this person up, but like they are more in their speech and there's no turning it on and off. Like this is who they are, period. And they're not even a caricature of what you would think of as a black person, but just from the way they sound, the inflection, and it could just be from where they were from. If there was a meter for black sounding black and being black, they would be more black than me. And
Wow.
it's not a switch that they have they turn on, and it's not that they're making a conscious decision. This is how they talk.
Yeah.
Like,
Hold on a
Blows my
second.
mind.
Go
It blows
ahead.
my mind. No,
But
no,
it's-
it's
it's-
making me think that
but it's like
things are
it's their environment. It's like, it's like this is who this person grew up around, and it's like it's not even like inappropriate stuff. It's not like, what's up, my N-word, or blah blah blah. It's just there's a certain tone and a certain rhythm of speech
Right.
that they are able to.
But that's how
But
we
that's
become who we are. I mean,
But
tribes
yeah.
do that. I mean,
Exactly,
as you're
tribes,
born and you learn to speak, and the tonality and all that comes from what you hear. So that's a part of just their growth process.
So if
But
we were
that's-
watching a movie,
different
and
to that.
if we were watching a movie, and let's say an Irish boy got brought up with, come up with something, bourbon. I don't know. Okay, whatever. But let's just say, I have no
white people
idea.
with some other white people.
Some other white people, and then they picked up their culture because they were groomed along with them. We would be like, hey, you grew up in this culture, but you can't. Yeah.
Well, see, that's the problem.
Oh,
with
Camille, I'm gonna
being
let
in a-
Camille and then Charles go ahead.
So sorry.
But
No,
we gotta wrap
I
up.
just wanted to say quickly to that because, like, how you said,
15 minutes.
this more black than me. Like, and I think about that on the spectrum of like black, white. You know what I mean? And like, oh, super black, super white. And it's like, and what's problematic is that the standard is always on this side. So it's like when people say to you, like, why are you trying to be white? Because you're trying to talk like this and articulate like what white supremacist society has deemed as appropriate, coherent language is how I am talking right now. And if I
Yeah.
throw in some big words, then I'm seen with more value because I have an education. But it's I think what's problematic is that everything exists within this system, and the fact that there's a spectrum of like most black, most white, and we're weighing the value. That's what's problematic. So like, even though I grew up with black friends and I was like, I dig this, I love this, I want to be a part of this, I like this music. I had to be personally responsible for like what I wanted to be a part of and how I wanted to celebrate the culture that I love and the people that I love.
Yeah, but see, that was your individual choice.
But
Not
I know, and
everybody
that's
does
what
that.
not everybody does that, but we could hold people to a higher
And that's what
standard.
should
But I'm
happen.
saying like her parents, I'm pretty sure they sound very similar to her.
Like
it's-
New
it's-
Orleans, New Orleans
That's a great
people,
example.
yeah,
That's-
like yeah,
that's
That's
Yeah.
dialect, and that's just from being in an area. That's totally different
When you put
from
it with skin color,
yeah, that's totally different from
But
taking that and then adding
But like if
on
some-
the gold chains and
Yeah, but that's not-
the
that's
Swear to
not
Bob,
a-
y'all got
and
2 more
things
minutes.
like that. It's
Charles said
it's
15.
different.
I'm going with
No,
Charles.
we got 15.
I said we got 2 more minutes, Charles. No, honestly,
it's
'cause
different though.
we were supposed to end before, but but it's okay. He's on, yeah. So anyway, this is not the time to discuss that, but still, go ahead. What were you
I
gonna say?
think that there's always going to be disagreement. And I think something that for me that I have to just like as a white person doing this kind of work, I have to come to terms with is like, I'll be on a thread on Facebook. I do a lot of
Oh, I know.
conversating on
I'm
Facebook.
like, Camille is a thug. I
but
shouldn't
it's
say she's
okay,
thug.
but
Am I
it's okay.
appropriating thugness to you?
That is a bad word in my mind. But no,
Actually, I
that,
think it's a good word, but go ahead.
no, I think it has. If you look at who's using it and how they're using it, I think that
It's
it's
a
But
important
that's,
who it's
but
used
that's,
to.
but that's the beautiful
It's
thing
well, that's
about
context.
is that
That's a
people will take
contextual
something
It
that
is
was
also racial,
meant
not
as
just
something
contextual.
bad and make it beautiful.
It was actually a religious term.
See,
They were a
anyways,
religious
anyways,
organization
but go ahead,
in
finish
India.
your-
They were called
finish
the
your,
Thugs.
I
They would
just
choke you
think
up.
what is problematic is people dismissing things to a point where you get a pass. I think that that is wrong for me personally. I know what I need to do. And I think it's funny when people are like, oh, you're vegetarian? Oh, well, what about that plant? You had to kill that plant and eat it. It's like, oh, those earrings, are those Native American? Are you appropriating it? And it's like, why do you feel the need to do that? Like, people will literally find any scrap that they can just in order to perpetuate something, because it's harder to do the work of not
Doggone it, the minute you said it, I started to wonder, like, who created the pattern that you're wearing? What culture did that come from? Yeah, that's so possible people could do that, huh?
I mean, literally, I think people find things in order to deflect, to not have to do the work. And what I see happen on, like, the online spaces is I'll be on a thread full of white people being like, Post Malone, and then, you know, a Latina girl will come on and say, oh, no, cultural appropriation is not real. And then all of those white people will be like, see,
thank you.
She said it.
Yes.
A person of color said it. It's not real.
Yes.
Which is like, I'm not going to then step in and tell that person of color, well, I think that you're wrong.
Why not?
Because I'm not here as a white person to tell people of color how to feel about their own culture.
But see, that's the thing, though, is that
I'm here to collect other white people.
okay.
It's there, not to be incorrect,
Go for
but
it.
I've done racial training as well, and in that racial training, it is white people's job to train white people, and it's black people's job to train black people, because we have a better understanding culturally, historically, and things like that. And it's not to say that we can't share with one another, but let's be honest. For the greater part, white people don't listen to black people. That's why it's not
And we
black
talked
people's
about that last
job
time.
to teach white people about the injustices that they are doing to us.
How do you learn about it if you don't learn from
You-
black people?
They do learn from us, and it is a subconscious type of learning. So we need to do a better job of taking a hold of our media
Camille will
and
be
presenting
like,
the
"That's what
images
Wikipedia is."
and taking control over the images that we have, setting the boundaries of what we do and do not allow. As you said, you know, commercially, Post Malone selling out, or whoever it is, because I don't listen to none of them, but whoever it is that's selling out, well, we ain't got to participate in that. We ain't got to jump in their videos with them and be like, yo, Chris Brown came out with Lil Dicky in a video. Cute video. Freaky Friday. Loved it. But yo, that is, and
First of
it's
all,
it's
who's
a
Lil
way,
Dicky?
it's
Second
a
of
white
all-
rapper.
So white people can't rap?
That's not the point.
Oh.
That's
Sorry.
a different show.
Yeah,
Okay.
but the point is, you know, if we don't want to feel be appropriated, then we also can't give that pass, invite to the cookout, because every time we do that, then when they grow and they take more, it's on us as the ones who allowed it in the first place.
But how do you see this is where my thing, because it's an individual thing with me.
We all have to get on one accord.
How?
That's where us as black people having this conversation is important, and them as white people having that
the
conversation
whole
so
time
they get on
we
accord.
tell
And that's
white
not to
people
say
that
we
we're
can't.
not a monolith. We always tell people we're not a monolith.
It's not
having
about
a
being a
standard,
mon- it's
not
about
being
having some-
monolithic. I mean, saying
about
this
having
is an
value.
injustice
But that's the thing is we
not-
all have different standards.
So
Right.
what?
But with
We all
certain
have different
things, we
standards,
need
we
to
all have
have
different
But we have
experience.
somewhat
laws,
same
we have
standards.
legislation that we agree on, that we put in place. We have other social responsibilities. We feed children in public schools. We agree that food is important. We create certain
Right.
standards,
But
and
that's not cultural. That's
but culture impacts and is infused in every single thing that we do and that
but
we are.
what I feel is acceptable is not going to be the same thing that Demond feels is acceptable. It's not going to be the same thing she feels
And
is
that's
acceptable.
understandable in starting out,
And
but
and
you
for
know,
me, like when I look at something, it's just that thing. Like I hate when people sit up there and be like, oh, well, you're trying to sound white, you're trying to sound black, you don't know what that person sounds like. You don't know, like there's no sound
But
for
you're
black people.
perpetuating that system, and that's where that work comes in. Of like, let's get rid of that system altogether, so that won't even mean anything anymore. You know.
So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna say closing comments. This is it. Even if they say something, this is your closing comments. So we're gonna go ahead and go around. So Damon, starting with you, closing comments. This conversation was amazing. So go ahead.
Okay, closing comments on cultural appropriation. If you're going to appreciate one, simple yet complex. A lot of times the answer lies within the culture in question, and sometimes it lies in an individual basis. As an individual from the outside, I see you writing notes. I see it as an individual on the outside. Would like to exercise care, caution, and understanding before I partake, and ask myself if what I'm doing is really uplifting someone else's culture before I do it. So
It's really great. Valencia.
Cultural appropriation is a part of the racial structure that exists within America and the injustices that occur within many of the within the justice structure, within the economic structure, within the employment structure. And if we're wanting to see change, we as African Americans need to be able to acknowledge that it exists, be able to see it in all of its forms. We need to try and get more ownership of who we are and as much as possible, so that we can use that to our benefit, and also stop giving away passes and cookout invitations to everyone, because without us holding ourselves to the higher standards that that we expect other people to hold us to, we won't be able to get past these things.
Excellent. Wonderful. Charles?
Yeah. Just go learn about people. Like, if you feel like it, if my rule for the whole appropriation thing, if you feel like an asshole, or you feel like you're doing something wrong, don't fucking do it. Like, you just being an asshole. You look like an asshole. Like, just don't fucking do it. Like, and if you feel comfortable about it and you feel like you can do it, and somebody comes up and questions you, stand on your square. Fucking stand by what you fucking do. Like, you know, be a man, be a woman, be an adult. Fucking stand by your word. Stand by your decisions.
Camille?
So, the white person on the last comment. Oh, okay. I think that there's no excuse anymore. When I was a kid, I could not pull out a cell phone. I could not get on my phone and Google. I think that there's absolutely no excuse this day and age. If you want to know something, you can look it up and you can know the answer. And if you have questions about something, then you can shut up. I'm speaking to white people specifically. You can shut up and you can listen. And I think it really is that easy. I think if you find yourself pushing back, then you need to stop and question that. Like, well, you know, this person of color said I couldn't do a thing. Well, my first instinct is to push back on that or personalize that. Then you need to stop and check in with yourself, and you need to do some research and dig deeper. Because I think that, you know, we are so used to existing in a system that is completely designed for us. And if we doubt that at all, just look around and see how Black people are portrayed in the media. How they're vilified, demonized, the language. I mean, recently with the bombing and the language around the victim, it's not hard to find evidence of the racist society that we live in. So I think that there's just no excuse anymore for making poor decisions, really, you know.
I have enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. Like, really, really, I have. I still don't know where I stand, but I've learned a lot, actually.
But if you still want to get the Wakanda jury, just make sure it's being made by an African American or African person, and then that'll make it less of an appropriation.
So I hope you enjoyed watching this episode. I thought it was really a great conversation. I enjoyed the conversation very much. And I thank you all for being here with us today. And thank you so much to everyone who's watching. And we will see you next time.
Intellectually engaging to think outside the lines with conversation about the nation that never leaves you blind. Take a listen and pay attention. Here is where you find the educational, sensational meeting of the minds. Yeah, it's the meeting of the minds. Meeting of the minds.